Into the Darkness of Mariana Trench. Brahm's technology of innovative inventions, also known as BrahmTec, was an independent company that rapidly gained popularity because of their impressive creations. The owner, William Brahm, was a man of vision, and he had a very capable crew to materialize his amazing ideas. The company was known for making industrial-grade electronic bikes and cars of their own design, and the high-quality products they put out were genuinely better than what the other competitors could offer. The inventions of BrahmTec was not for everybody. Along with the high-grade materials and elaborate designs, each of their products had a hefty price tag to match its outstanding quality. BrahmTec became a brand only for those who could afford it, and it became a token of prestigious status. However, William did not stop from these conventional land vehicles. His ideas were grand and potentially groundbreaking, but the next projects he decided to embark in were too grand for his own good. After years of success, BrahmTec ventured into a more daring invention. Metaphorically and quite literally, William wished to reach the new heights for his company. They designed a small rocket ship in an attempt to go beyond the world's atmosphere and out to space. The idea was to create a 4-seated vehicle that had enough power to launch itself off and safely fly right back in. William hired a number of rocket scientists to turn this radical dream into reality. He proudly announced and advertised this project to the public, and it received both constructive and appreciative criticisms from the people. The selling pitch was that this vehicle would be accessible to those who could fly and afford it, but the concept itself was questioned by several experts of the field for obvious reasons. And just as many had suspected, the project went down the drain after countless ineffective reiterations, numerous failed trials, and millions of dollars wasted. The reputation of the prestigious company was tarnished. However, this failure did not stop William from having big ideas. BrahmTec's budget significantly depleted because of their previous failure, and the company was losing their ground on the market because of their tainted reputation and the rising competitors. In order to reclaim his brand's former status, he announced another project that also received a lot of attention. Instead of trying to fly up, he decided to make something that could dive down. Aided by a few investors and along with the rest of their production funds, William gave everything in order to materialize this new concept. It was a gamble to say the least, but they were able to launch their most expensive project ever. Guided by a few experts, William and his team designed a submersible craft. After a year of production, BrahmTec introduced their very first submersible vehicle called the DeepDiver Alpha. Just like their previous products, it was composed of high-grade materials and cutting-edge engineering. The pressure vessel was made of titanium, which was shaped into a spherical cone in order to make enough room for 5 people. Other submersible crafts had spherical pressure vessels that could only hold 1 or 2 passengers at a time. And DeepDiver Alpha's design was the very first of its kind. With 2 porthole windows and 4 high-powered multi-directional propellers, this small yet versatile underwater vehicle had enough muscle to carry its weight while offering a good view for the passengers to enjoy the marine life. Aside from making the craft itself, they also had to purchase and modify a ship that was equipped with proper equipment to support and keep track of the unit. It took millions of dollars for this daring project to come to fruition. As a means of recovering the money they had spent, BrahmTec offered underwater explorations to the public and let them experience the magnificence of their latest invention. Needless to say, those who were interested to ride the DeepDiver Alpha had to pay an exorbitant fee and also sign a waiver. Because of the submersible's unorthodox shape and size, there was no facility in the world that was capable of testing its integrity under hazardous pressure levels. BrahmTec claimed that they ran the product in several tests and simulations prior to launching, but this statement was quite questionable to say the least. They stated that the unit was an experimental craft and the customers had to ride at their own risk. The DeepDiver Alpha was able to survive 4 expeditions without any serious issues, and 2 of those were quite remarkable. They conquered the depths of the Hellenic Trench in the Mediterranean Sea, which was about 16,700 feet deep, and also the lowest point of the Arctic, which was about 18,000 feet deep. Reaching those depths were quite a feat, especially with an experimental submersible that was doubted by many. They were able to prove that their design was effective for underwater expeditions with highly dangerous pressure levels, and those who questioned the integrity of the vehicle were proven wrong in the best way possible. The reviews from the passengers were all positive, and the interest towards BrahmTec's new invention had grown. However, the company was still far from earning back their capital for the project despite of the successful advertising and impressive explorations. They needed to market the submersible craft to the individuals who would want to purchase a unit for their own. In order to show that the DeepDiver Alpha was more than capable and the best of its kind, they decided to venture into the deepest place known to men. BrahmTec had decided to test their creation against the horrifying depth of the Mariana Trench. As others have said before, there are more people who landed on the moon than those who were able to reach the depth of the Mariana Trench in the West Pacific Ocean. Named after the surveyor ship who first recorded its depth, the Challenger Deep at the southern end of the trench was the deepest point of the Earth that mankind was able to reach. The successful expeditions of the DeepDiver Alpha were dwarfed by this abyss. With a depth of about 36,000 feet, a fraction of error or miscalculation would result to an instant death. With a water pressure of 8 tons per square inch, a human would be reduced to nothing in less than a second. Along with William Brahm himself and the craft operator Reggie Torres, this dangerous expedition was joined by potential clients. On board the DeepDiver Alpha were a marine biologist, Nancy Stern, a prolific entrepreneur, James Welsh, and the novelist Herbert Reed. Driven by curiosity and their own interest, they accepted the risk and trusted BrahmTec's experimental submersible vehicle. After all, it was proven to be dependable based on its previous explorations. Everyone was filled with excitement as they were laid off the support vessel. They observed their surroundings through the porthole windows as the light from the above was slowly depleting. The layers of the ocean could be described by the level of luminance they received from the surface. Around the depth of 700 feet, people refer to this level as the midwaters or the twilight zone. Capable submersible vehicles could easily reach this zone safely. In this level, the light is already very faint, and the bioluminescent inhabitants began to glow. These luminescent creatures were the only source of light when they reached 3,300 feet, which was called the midnight zone. As they dove deeper and deeper into the cold waters, there was hardly anything at all when they reached 13,000 feet. This level was called the Abyss, and it was quite a fitting name when there was nothing around but complete darkness. The navigation lights from the submersible were the only source of illumination, but it was getting harder to discern the distance since there was nothing to illuminate. The emptiness outside of their craft was almost unnerving, and they were yet to reach their destination. As they passed the abyssal zone and reached the depth of 20,000 feet, they entered a void of the unknown. Everyone on board were both thrilled and anxious at the same time. Their hearts were pounding rapidly as they steadily glanced at nothing but complete blankness. And when they reached 30,000 feet, every person on board held their breaths until they felt a nudge from below. Soil dispersed from the ground, and the operator Reggie made an announcement. They finally landed on the ocean floor. The DeepDiver Alpha was able to reach the Challenger Deep in one piece. They were all ecstatic and proud of this noteworthy achievement that could be written in history of underwater expeditions. William and Reggie shook hands with wide smiles on their faces for the remarkable success of their invention, and James Welsh was nodding his head in agreement. The passengers peeked from the windows as the submersible began to move while illuminating the path before them. This unexplored world that was enveloped in darkness had a lot of undiscovered things. Marine biologist Nancy Stern kept on recording every species that could only be found in this particular seabed, and they were all in awe as they came across a submarine volcano that was actively spewing black smog. The underwater terrain at the southern end of the Mariana Trench was like a submerged canyon where only other well-adapted creatures could survive. Despite of these dreadful conditions, some living things were able to strive. The DeepDiver Alpha roamed around for hours, and it was the only manned submersible craft that managed to cover a lot of ground while under this level of destructive pressure. Just as they expected, they began to see things that were never seen before. Nancy Stern enthusiastically pointed out an unidentified creature a few feet away from the craft. It was long, with a transparent body and luminescent strands of thin tentacles like that of a jellyfish, but it had a peculiar shape and was moving erratically. They traced its movements while it floated up in a very slow phase. And it was then when they saw a rock formation that towered over them. This elevation could be seen on the topographic map that they had, but they discovered something peculiar about it. There were creases on the mountain wall that was populated by rare planktons and unidentified species of anemones, and what surprised them the most was the remains of a ship embedded on the rock. The wreck looked like a cargo vessel from the World War. Based on the design and the thick germination that covered the entire structure, it was clear that this ship has been there for thousands of years. Everybody was extremely astounded by this discovery, and they all took pictures and videos as the submersible carefully moved closer to the wreck. They wondered how this ship got there, and why was it stuck on a natural mountain wall 35,000 feet from the surface. Unfortunately, the answer to this question was more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Within the darkness that enshrouded the deepest ocean floor lied the true leviathan of this unknown world. When the navigation lights illuminated the shipwreck part by part, the novelist Herbert Reed noticed something strange. He said that he saw something moving inside of the ship. The others were very intrigued, and so they decided to move dangerously close to the vessel. As the group remained silent while staring closely to the crack in the deck, Nancy suddenly tapped William's shoulder. He turned his head and saw her face turning pale. Out of mere intuition, or perhaps due to her vast experience in the field, Nancy frantically told Reggie to get away from the shipwreck immediately. However, it was too late. The operator tried to move the submersible, but it wouldn't budge at all. Something was holding them in place, and none of them could see what it was. William shone the lights around them, and chills crawled up his spine when he realized why they couldn't move. From the wide crack at the deck of the vessel, there were translucent tentacles that wrapped around their submersible craft. As this unidentified creature slowly squeezed itself out of the shipwreck, the passengers began to scream. This gigantic cephalopod showed its terrifying size as a row of luminescent light started to glow around its body. Its head alone was roughly 40 feet long, and its tentacles were unimaginably strong. Reggie gave every power of the submersible to the propellers in hopes that he could power through, but the grip of this horrific beast was simply too strong. There was nothing they could do while the translucent titan was pulling the craft closer and closer to the shipwreck. Behind the deck of the old vessel was a hole within the mountain wall, and the submersible craft began to fall apart as it collided against the ship and the rocks. Back at the surface, the crew of the submersible's support vessel didn't know what to do. Their communication was fluctuating, and all they could hear were the passengers screaming. They knew where they were, but there was nothing they could do to help. A few moments later, they completely lost their line of communication. They waited for hours, but they could no longer detect the craft. The DeepDiver Alpha was never seen again.